Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be responding to Carnivore Camaradierie's response to me. If you're not familiar with who this guy is and why I'm not too fond of him, he's the up-and-coming carnivore YouTuber who I believe is around 18 years old, who agreed to have a public debate with the Nutrivore on nutrition and a proposition which he wanted to defend. This debate was meant to be public, and Carnivore Camaraderie consented to this debate being recorded and publicized. Carnivore Camaraderie ended up getting destroyed in this debate beyond belief, which you can see in a roast compilation I made of the debate. I'll have that link below. And after the Nutrivore posted the debate publicly, Carnivore Camaraderie reported the debate for privacy reasons in an effort to get it taken down. Now, after watching the video, you'll discover that Carnivore Camaraderie pretty much has never been pressed on his beliefs in the amount that he was pressed in this debate. And you'll come to the conclusion that he actually is incapable of sufficiently defending why he believes what he believes. At the end of his video responding to me, he mentioned he would like to converse with me. And I commented back saying after his behavior with the Nutrivore, I'd rather have a debate rather than a conversation. And I asked him what proposition he would like to defend. I said this because I suspected his experience from his debate with the Nutrivore has made him wary of ever trying to defend his beliefs in a formal debate again with somebody competent enough to press him. He emailed me back saying he will have a debate, but he refuses to defend any proposition because it'll put him at a disadvantage. This response only reinforced my suspicion about him. It's clear that after his experience with Nutrivore, he is afraid to defend what he believes in. And I mean, can you really blame him? Again, if you watch the debate, you'll see that he was just absolutely defeated toward the end, and he realized he couldn't actually adequately defend what he believes in. So because he refuses to have a debate where he defends a proposition, I offered up the proposition. Carnivore Camaraderie lost his debate with the Nutrivore, and I said that I would defend it. He responded asking me for a proposition. I told him I just sent one, and he hasn't responded since, and it's been about a week from the moment in time in which I am recording this video. Now, I can't read minds, but it seems he just refuses to acknowledge this debate even happened. And of course, my defense of that debate proposition would require him to explain how his beliefs were sufficiently defended in his debate with the Nutrivore. Does this mean that we will never see Carnivore Camaraderie defend his beliefs in a debate with somebody who he knows will offer adequate pushback? Who knows? Possibly. All right, so let's get on with the video. And he did a live response to me in that he was in the bottom left of the screen while watching me. So I'm gonna do the same thing, except I'll be in the bottom right of the screen so we can have that YouTuber responding to YouTuber inception aesthetic.
This video should be a really fun one. It's called Why Conservatives Are So Against Veganism. This is gonna be interesting. If you're wondering why I'm wearing glasses, it's because I eat such a nutrient deficient diet. I don't get enough vitamin A. My eyes don't really work properly anymore, so I need a prescription. Obviously,
that sarcasm sounds very familiar. I feel like it's more applicable to us vegans because we always get accused of not having enough vitamin A, but okay, we'll keep going. Let me know what you guys think. Was his sarcasm up to par with mine? Was his better? I'm curious.
I'm just kidding. It's because I'm trying to minimize my exposure late at night so I can get some better sleep. Let's get right into the video.
No, absolutely not. I would not eat lab-grown meat because meat is not meant to be grown in a lab.
That's a great point. I wonder why the vegans don't understand that. It seems like a perfectly reasonable point. It is perfectly reasonable.
Why?
I don't know. It's just very confusing when people say those things because they're saying meat's not meant to be grown in a lab. Presumably that just means it's because it's not natural. But the meat that they are consuming is the product of other artificial means like artificial insemination or artificial selection, animals being artificially selected to yield the most product over the years. So it's just very confusing when these things are said in an effort to oppose lab-grown meat. But hey, maybe there's such thing as a natural spectrum where these people draw their line and when something is too unnatural or not. Maybe that's what it is. Let's see.
Look, if you want to be vegan, but just eat natural things.
I want to eat something that's real. That's the real thing that came from the earth.
Is that so crazy to want something real from the earth? I guess
it's not that it's crazy. It's just very confusing because lab-grown meat comes from the earth. So does plant-based meat. We didn't go to Mars and steal resources from Mars or the moon, bring them back to the earth, and then make plant-based products. It all came from the earth. So it's all just very confusing what these people mean when they use phrases like natural because the food they're eating is the product of artificial processes, and phrases like something that came from the earth when all of this came from the earth, right?
To the vegans it is.
From the planet that was actually intended for us to be eating, not out of a lab that's made of, I don't know what, made of chemicals, implanted with chips.
I love how he didn't say anything about her implying that there are chips implanted in our vegan mock products. Everything else, let's pause there, but not there. Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be discussing what seems to be a very high proportion of people who oppose lab-grown meat and plant-based meat.
Oh, of course. This stuff is complete garbage.
Who identify as conservative. I'm not sure what he means by garbage. If he means garbage with respect to health outcomes, just provide evidence for that. I'm not saying these things are healthy per se, but, if you're going to claim they're garbage, at least provide some resources, right? It would seems to be because I haven't been able to find any concrete data in the form of a survey or something confirming that a higher proportion of conservatives are opposed to plant-based meat or incoming lab-grown meat.
Well, let's think about what conservatives are. They're trying to conserve values, typically, trying to stop going so far away from nature, while people on the left tend to be promoting a way of life that deviates from nature, trying to impose social ideologies that simply are not consistent with natural humans, of course.
Natural humans murdered each other. They raped each other. So I'd say it's a good thing to be on the side of humanity that is trying to push away from what natural humans did, at least in that respect. And this is where my overall confusion comes with where these appeal to nature fallacy walkers draw their line in what is and isn't natural, or what level of naturalness we should accept and not accept. Right? Because if we take the appeal to nature fallacy to its fullest thing, it's like, why would we implement anything? Why are you wearing glasses? Why are you sitting there with headphones in your ears like I am right now? So we got to know where exactly this line is. And if you have good data to support where you draw that line. And as we saw in the debate with Nutrivore, like the research that he cited to defend something like the consumption of a natural diet, which he defined as something that was 80% meat and 20% not meat, he couldn't defend it properly. His evidence was weak. He couldn't explain why his evidence was more expected on his hypothesis than an alternative hypothesis. And when that would happen, he just continued to try other things. And as you see, by the end of the roast compilation I compiled, he had all of these different responses that he seemingly came up with on the spot, and they were all just shot down. And then he left the debate because he couldn't defend his beliefs.
So it makes sense why conservatives would be more likely to prefer a real animal, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I don't know what you mean by real animal. An animal, I guess, maybe that was natural, came across through natural processes, but then these animals came about from artificial processes like artificial insemination and artificial selection. So I don't know. I'm just confused when the word's naturally used here.
Natural cow.
Than say people who identify as progressives. However, in my experience, like he has to be aware that we've used artificial selection to make animals yield more product, right? So I don't know what he means by natural animal. It does seem like this is the case.
Of course it's the case.
And many vegans I've talked to, including conservative ones, share this perception or intuition. I've covered anti-lab meat
intuition
in plant-based people on my channel. Yeah, it's an intuition. Is there a problem with using the word intuition there? Many times, and they are very often conservative. This only further reinforces my intuition here. Obviously, there exists progressives. Oh no, I said intuition again. Who oppose lab-grown and plant-based meat as well, but it does seem conservatives oppose them to a higher degree. When you think of this simply in regard to what it means to be a progressive or conservative, it intuitively makes sense to think that a conservative, somebody who by definition is averse to change or innovation, would be less likely.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Averse to change. Yeah, because change is typically bad. Change tends to be indicative of moving away from nature, and
change is typically bad. Now imagine if I asked him to defend that proposition in a debate. Change is typically bad. I guess what that means, if we were to try to break down what that is into a proposition, is change more often than not has brought about bad things than good things. So much to unpack there. That would take a long time, probably a longer time than it took Nutrivore to come up with a proposition in their debate. But yeah, fascinating.
If we want to live long, happy lives and sustain.
He said long, happy lives. He's implying longevity there. We saw what happened when he tried to defend the longevity claim in his debate with Nutrivore.
Ourselves on this planet, we need to embrace nature. That's the only way.
To accept an innovation like plant-based meat or lab-grown meat compared to somebody like a progressive. And here's some.
There's nothing good about being progressive, especially in the context.
There's nothing good about being progressive. Well, it took being a progressive human being to come up with those glasses on your face, the clothing, the microphone. It took wanting to progress as a human being to have all these new innovations that you seem to clearly take advantage of that are outside of nature. So again, where is the line drawn? And when you say that, I mean, what did he say again? It was a very absolute claim. And here's some.
There's nothing good about being progressive.
There's nothing good about being progressive. We got to know how he defines the word progressive, because if you just mean it in the form of progressing as a species or as a person, that's going to entail using things that you now use that were out of nature years ago, like your glasses and your headphones, and what you're using to broadcast this beautiful, ancestral, natural message artificially to a bunch of people online.
Especially in the context of today.
Data on the left-wing, right-wing divide in the US in regard to meat consumption from a 2018 Gallup poll.
Interesting.
Overall, 5% of Americans consider themselves vegetarian, with another 3% considering themselves vegan. When we take a look at the ideological differences amongst this 5% of Americans that are vegetarian and 3% of Americans that are vegan, we find that 11% of liberals are vegetarian, whereas only 2% of conservatives are vegetarians. With this data
That's pretty expected, I think.
alone, we can say that liberals are 5.5 times more likely to be vegetarian compared to conservatives.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes so much sense.
Something similar is observed. Yeah, it makes sense for sure. I don't know why that's funny. In regard to vegans, with liberals being 2.5 times more likely to be vegan than conservatives. While I'm aware that the antithesis of a conservative isn't necessarily a liberal and more so a progressive, I still found this survey helpful, seeing as a sizable majority of people who identify as the progressive left describe their views as liberal. But anyway, I've noticed that as plant-based meat and lab-grown meat have become more of a topic of conversation, it's often conservatives that are vehemently opposed to both. To no surprise, much of their reasons for opposing plant-based meat and lab-grown meat are in the form of, I want the real thing, I don't want to eat something that is made in a lab or that isn't natural. And although they don't
good. That's all. That's literally all you need.
tend to say
Anything we've shown consistently that not doing what nature intended is destroying us. The seed oils, the refined grains, the sugar, like all these things that we wouldn't do in nature, that we wouldn't consume in nature, all the social activities that we're undertaking.
just so you guys know, he's just relying on ecological data to support these claims, at least from what I've seen. Just because things like, oh, we've changed things, we've gotten closer to technology or whatever, that means that we're now having all these terrible problems. You can just bring up again, like what was brought up in his debate with Nick, which is survivorship bias. He never disputed that when it was brought up to him, and that all these people that should have died in childhood end up living and end up possibly producing worse off offspring, because we have things like modern medicine to help sicker populations grow up who will tend to have more sickness as well. Yeah, survivorship bias is something that was brought up multiple times in his debate with Nutrivore to account for things like what he's describing right now, and he was never able to offer reasons why his evidence was more expected on his hypothesis than the survivorship bias hypothesis. So I don't know. I wonder what he would say to that, because when he was pressed on it in his debate, he had nothing.
The way that we're going about medicine, I mean, these things are not natural and they're destroying us. It's pretty clear that being evolutionarily consistent.
If I don't respond, guys, it's just because he's making claims and not giving any evidence.
Is the remedy to a lot of these problems. And when you suggest factory-made meat, fake meat, industrial products, you're pushing away from nature. You're pushing it away.
Say it explicitly. Well, I never suggested these products as solutions to these problems, but okay. As conservatives, it's clear another reason is that they just don't want change. I mean, they identify as conservatives after all.
There's a reason why, though. They don't want change because change has proven to be bad. We've changed so much, and it's turned out so badly for us.
Change is proven to be bad. Like, it's just such a broad statement. Without the change of the development of lenses, you would not be able to see properly right now, or you wouldn't be able to cover your eyes from the blue light on your screen. You wouldn't have this microphone to talk to broadcast your very ancestral message through artificial means that are non-ancestral, right? I don't know what you mean when you say change is just bad. It's obvious that there's such thing as changes that are good and bad. There's things that are natural that are good and bad. I don't know. It's very confusing. Where is the line drawn? You know?
Everyone is depressed. Everyone is sick. There's a much lower quality of life than we had when we were embracing nature.
Okay. First of all, everybody being depressed at the moment, even if I just accepted that was the case, that doesn't mean that other types of change could have remedied that or prevented that. Okay, also depression and shit like that. Does he know if depression was being seeked out as much as it's being seeked out today and tested for? It wasn't even a category of something medically in the ancestral times he wants us to go back to. There's just a lot of evidence that needs to be provided to support the things he's saying. And it comes back to the same thing with the nutrivore's debate with him, which is the alternative hypotheses and if he can account for them. He wasn't able to in the debate. I don't know if he could now if pressed.
So I'm not sure what his point is here. Yeah, we don't want this ridiculous change that's going to hurt us even more.
Part of the concern, yeah, let me just emphasize that point again, because perhaps I didn't word it as best as I could. Just because a certain subset of changes happened and then bad things happened doesn't mean that change itself is bad. It could just mean that that particular set of change was bad. Okay, this is very like, I don't know, I don't want to be a dick, but like it's very simple to understand. And also, he hasn't even provided evidence that these changes cause these bad outcomes. Conservatives' opposition to lab-grown and plant-based meat, which is in the form of, oh, this isn't a lab or this isn't natural, is very ironic when you take into account that the meat they consume today is the product of artificial insemination and artificial selection. With
Like everything else. I mean, yeah, but it's the...
Okay, wait, so he admits that these things aren't natural. Okay, let's see where he goes now.
The degree to which it's changed that matters.
Okay, so there's a random line drawn where the level of unnaturalness becomes a problem. And how do we get that line? Is there a paper for this? Like, is there data on this? Like, that's a very hard thing to defend. Imagine if Nutrivore pushed him on this unnatural spectrum or natural spectrum that he's defending or opposing right now.
You can't make it so black and white, so binary. It's like, this has been changed, this hasn't been changed. These things exist on a spectrum. For example, you take
Okay, so there is a spectrum.
a fruit like an apple. Well, what's been changed more in the last 400 years? An apple or a piece of beef, a cow? It's very clear that an apple has been changed thousands of times to a degree much greater, thousands of times greater than the cow.
That's not clear evidence.
So to make it as simple as he's saying, it's kind of ridiculous.
With this, we can conclude that lab-grown meat, plant-based meat, and traditional meat, which they claim is natural, actually all share the property of being unnatural.
Oh, that's so moronic. That's so stupid.
How was that moronic when I made this video, there was no spectrum given. It was just like, that's unnatural. That was made in a lab. Therefore, I don't want to use it. It's weird that you're calling it moronic, that, oh, silly us. We didn't know that there was some random arbitrary line that you drew on the spectrum of natural and unnaturalness that you've yet to even defend.
It's like saying, yeah, there's this person who's 10 pounds overweight. There's a person who's 50 pounds overweight, and there's a person who's 300 pounds overweight. Well, they're all the same because they're all overweight, right? Like, they're all the same thing.
No, that's a really bad analogy because I was criticizing people categorically objecting to things based on them just being unnatural. Okay, so for you to deploy this example where there's 3 people overweight and they're overweight to varying proportions as somehow analogous to what objections your community makes, which is that that's unnatural. No, it'd be more accurate if someone was saying that being overweight is bad. Okay, and then I brought up 3 people that were overweight, that were different levels of overweight, and I said, with respect to that person's system, these 3 people are bad and that they're all overweight. That's a much better analogy than to just like pretend like a spectrum of naturalness was explicitly demonstrated by people like Candace Owens and that conservative lady I was responding to in the video. So no, come on, dude.
Being overweight is just one thing. It's so dumb. It's so stupid.
Never seen a conservative who opposes lab-grown meat and plant-based meat for reasons of artificiality be challenged on this point in this way.
I just debunked your stupid point, though.
Although I would love to. No, you didn't. You just put in a spectrum as if the person I was responding to put in a spectrum. And no, they were just categorically saying like, this is unnatural. I want something real. So no. You did not debunk the point. See it. I mean,
I just did. It's completely ridiculous. It's nonsense saying that these things are so binary.
Do you want to see, like, we can go back to the beginning of the video that I was responding to. This lady just said, I want something real. I want something from the earth. She didn't say, I want something real, but a certain level of unnatural, but still natural enough up to my standing. Like that was never said. It was just very categorical claims being made.
On the spectrum.
What would be the relevant difference such that one is natural and one is not natural?
Oh, it's so dumb. It's so
I speculate that as lab-grown meat is brought to... So now the question, now that we know his system, is what is the morally relevant difference? Not morally. Whoops. Stuck on the animal rights talk. What is the relevant difference or set of differences such that one instance of unnaturalness is up to your standard for being unnatural, but still natural enough, whereas something else isn't? I got to know what that is. Scale and is equalized in pricing to traditional meat, reasons to go vegan will seem much more palatable to progressives rather than conservatives. Mainly because...
Yeah, it's going to be really dangerous if lab meat becomes big. It really will be dangerous because it'll
Why is that?
probably be cheaper. And it'll be garbage for us. They're probably going to pay for studies showing that.
How do you know it'll be garbage for you? Especially under the assumption that it's going to be molecule for molecule the same thing.
That eating the fake meat is better than eating the real meat. So people are going to be convinced that it's fine and it's cheaper. That could really lead to some negative.
They're going to pay for studies to conclude that, or maybe they'll conduct studies and they'll come to that conclusion. What if they do come to that conclusion? Are you going to still be opposed to it because it's unnatural? Like, if lab-grown meat yields the same exact health outcomes as meat from these artificially bred animals, I'm not going to say natural animals because they're not, what would be your objection to it from a health perspective?
Outcomes. That's actually a pretty scary idea. I haven't really thought about it.
Because progressives are a terrifying idea if they do studies on lab-grown meat and regular meat and see if the health outcomes are the same. Very terrifying. Less likely to oppose new things and innovation, plus they're already more likely to be vegan anyway. I further speculate that as lab-grown meat becomes as accessible as plant-based meat and many more people hop on, quote, the vegan train, the vegan movement's primary target of opposition will be conservatives. And this is also interesting to me because we can only assume that the health outcomes for lab meat will be very similar to the health outcomes for meat derived from animals.
Oh, that's so dumb.
Why is that dumb? If it's the same product, just lab made, why would the health outcomes be different?
The health outcomes for lab meat is going to be the same for real meat? Is this guy going insane?
Which I don't think this guy understands what lab grown meat is meant to be. Like it is a replication of what he's consuming. Unless there's something magical about the fact that it's in a lab as opposed to coming from an animal living in their own feces that makes it healthier in the animal case and not the lab case. Conservatives love some. And I think I can guess that if I were to ask him what the difference is, he would just say, oh, it's not natural. And then, of course, we go back to the whole, well, yours isn't natural either. And then he's going to say, well, it's not as unnatural as mine. Oh, sorry. More like, what I'm eating isn't natural, but lab-grown meat is more unnatural. And that level of unnaturalness with the lab-grown meat is past my arbitrarily set threshold of what is too unnatural. So much, seeing as lab meat is molecularly identical to traditional meat.
Well, there's no, it's not possible. It's not possible, right? Like they
What do you mean it's not possible?
They tried to do this with farm-raised fish. The nutritional profile of farm-raised salmon is not even close to the wild thing. You have a real animal, a real piece of life that it eats grass and grows. It's a part of nature. It's not possible.
Both of those are real animals.
No matter what you do, no matter how advanced the science is to replicate that. No reasonable person would deem that possible. And
how is it not possible? What is the law of nature that's being violated in that it's a physical impossibility to have them have the same nutrient profile?
The reason why I say that is because pharmaceutical industry, they've tried to do this thing where they fix one problem without causing another. They try to do this thing where they pinpoint one issue and no repercussions when they try to ameliorate it. And that never works because there's repercussions to every single drug pharma has made.
Okay, first of all, I'm not sure how true that is absolutely, but it's already known that pharmaceuticals are administered with a risk-benefit analysis. If a certain person has a condition, they may need to take this other drug, which might have this side effect, but them not having the drug results in long-term worse health outcomes. It's always a risk-benefit analysis when it comes to this stuff. Of course, many drugs have side effects, but that doesn't mean that now we can't administer them. It's known that it's a risk-benefit analysis when you administer particular drugs for particular conditions or diseases. So this isn't really news. I'm not sure how this is even relevant.
Every single one. This is no different. We cannot create things that are unnatural and pretend that they're like the natural thing. We can't do it.
And here's the more, again, he's even said here, we cannot create things that are unnatural and pretend they're like the natural thing. He already acknowledged that those animals we're eating aren't natural. So he's back to the whole like absolute language and saying that, yeah, it is natural, when he already acknowledged that it's not. And then when he had that put in his face, he was like, well, it's a spectrum. Obviously it's not natural, but it's more natural than lab-grown meat. And here's the more interesting part that I cannot wait to see unfold. With lab meat in comparison to traditional meat being more environmentally friendly, more in favor of animal rights, tasting the same, resulting in the same health outcomes.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, it'll make you sick. It's funny.
Well, saying it'll make you sick doesn't really conflict with what I said. I just said it'll be the same health outcome. So if one makes you sick, then the other will make you sick because it's the same health outcomes.
It will make you sick. Eating
But also we need evidence of this. Come on, dude.
factory-grown meat there's no way it's good for us. Impossible.
And being unnatural, just like current meat is, impossible. What arguments will conservatives be? Remember what happened with him in his debate with Nick when he said the word impossible. Able to provide in favor of consuming traditional meat over lab meat.
Lab meat is unhealthy. Lab meat will make us sick. Lab meat does not have the nutritional profile of real meat. It's simply not possible. That's why.
Besides evidence, something really stupid like ewy, that's new, I don't like newness. They're probably going to look incredibly f***ing stupid, but we'll see.
We need to look at what new things do to us. We need to look at what novelty brings to humans, how it affects us. And what you'll find is that the more new things we integrate, the worse off we are. I think that's so linear, you know? The more new stuff, the worse off we get. And
dude, how can you even... We know he's making these conclusions based off of ecological data. It's like, dude, there could be one new thing we implemented that causes all the problems. And then we had all these other new things happen that had no contribution to the problem. And you're going to go off of your ecological data and say, look, the more new things we added, the more problems we had. This is why you can't just go off of ecological data to come to these kinds of conclusions. It's incredibly silly. You have to adjust for so many things. I'm not surprised. I mean, like when you watch his debate with Nutrivore, his grasp on these concepts is very little. But yeah, I'd love to see that claim substantiated. The more new things we add, the worse things are.
You can basically use metrics like sickness, for example. We get more sick the more new things we add. We get more unhappy. We get more depressed. All these things are caused by new stuff, new things.
Watching this video, who already addressed this, who is opposed to lab-grown meat, I'm curious what your reasoning would be for rejecting lab-grown meat over traditional meat, given everything I mentioned before. So the premise that it's better for the animals, better for the environment.
Better for the environment. There's no way. There's no way, because if we don't have animal agriculture, then the ecosystem will fail. Like if you put cows and sheep and chickens and pigs into the environment, they will grow the soil. They will help replenish the soil. They're so good for the environment because these things work in ecosystems.
I'm not even gonna, like, let's just accept the premise that what he said was true. We don't have to go into all the other ways we can take care of land. If that's all true, then okay, let's do it. But no killing the animal for their flesh. If you need their fertilizer, okay. But why do we have to kill the animal?
They don't work independently. Plants don't work independently of animals, and animals don't work independently of plants. They work together in unison. And then when the animals poop, that bacteria helps to grow the plants, the grass again. These things work together. You can't distinguish them. You can't
Okay, we can get them to poop and we don't have to kill them.
separate them at all.
Again, I'm even just entertaining what he's saying, or granting that what he's saying is true.
That will destroy the environment, and that's what he's promoting. He's promoting lab-grown meat, which will, in turn, if it gets big, destroy the environment.
Tastes the same, is just as evidence. Healthy, costs the same, and is unnatural just like your current meat. I'm very excited to hear your response. And
I hope you watch this video. Maybe we could have a talk.
just in case you're a vegan watching who wonders how lab-grown meat can technically be considered vegan when it requires an animal, understand there are now animal-free means by which we can generate... All right, I believe that's the end of the response. So, yeah, guys, that's it. I mean, just walking appeal to nature. You know how it goes. He knows what my proposition is, and if he wants to defend it, then just reach out. You have my email. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you support my work and want to support me on Patreon, you can click the link in the pinned comment and get early access to content. And if you don't know, I do have a book going over most, if not all, of the anti-vegan arguments you're gonna hear online. If you wanna get that as well, that'll be linked in the pinned comment. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude,
fuck off. I don't want anything to do with you. Don't ever speak to me again. You're a fucking piece of shit.
even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who's your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude,